All right, good morning, class. Hopefully everybody's doing good today. We are still working on our 3.2. We're going to do some cylinder head inspections here. And so we're going to do number 1, if you can see that. I'm going to try to get you guys to see that. And then, so what that is basically we're going to inspect the cylinder head and we're going to check for cracks, damage. We're going to check the mating surfaces for warpage. And then check the condition of the passages, inspect the core expansion and galley plugs, and we're going to see if it needs any work or not. Okay, so first off, let's start off with our inspection. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to look at it, basically. And so you're going to take a look and see, make sure there's nothing wearing, because sometimes parts get loose. They'll wear the aluminum. You'll find like aluminum shavings in there or something like that. This one looks pretty good. We also want to check for cracks. So all inside here, down in these passageways, and next in between the valves, even on the top up here, sometimes they'll crack. These aluminum heads will crack. And you're going to check all of your other passageways. So you have an intake and an exhaust side. So you're going to look inside of here, see if there's cracks. A lot of times the coolant passages will crack. So there's like coolant passages for the head as well. And so you're just going to kind of look around and just give it a good look over. And same thing with the bottom. This is a 4-valve head, so it's got 4 valves per cylinder. And so what we're going to do is in between these valves, this little space in between the valves, you're going to look at that really closely in all of the spaces. And you want to make sure there's no cracks, because that's like the most common place a head will crack. You can machine that out. You take the valves out, take it apart, send it to the machine shop. They'll cut that crack out as best they can, if they can cut it all the way out. And then they will weld that back up or TIG it, whatever they're going to do. And then they remachine the hole and put a new valve seat in there. And so you want to make sure you look at those. These look pretty good. There's a little bit of a looks like a crack right there, but it's actually it's the machine portion of where the spark plug goes in. So that's not really a crack. You just want to make sure it's not a crack. And then you're going to look at all your passageways again. And then you also have your exhaust ports, and taking exhaust ports on both sides. And so you're just going to make a quick overview of all that. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is you're going to have to check your surfaces for warpage. And so what we need is a straight edge. This is what a straight edge looks like right here. Usually they're a lot more shiny than this, but it's basically just a piece of metal that they have machined perfectly straight and level. And so this one here has, it's kind of a smaller one, so it's good for this head. And what we're going to do is we're going to check, we're going to do like a bunch of different angles here. And so I want to do an angle here, I want to do an angle here, crossways like this, back and forth, right down the middle. I want to do one like this and like that, and over here as well, like that. And then even across even the cylinders like themselves, we can do crosses like that. And we just check the heck out of it. And the way we check it now is we're going to put this across there, and we take a feeler gauge. And usually there is a allowable warpage that's in the book. So depending on the vehicle that you're working on and what the manufacturer repair manual says is allowable, I usually just set my feeler gauge to that tolerance. So for example, this one's at 8 thousandths. So this head is allowed 8 thousandths warpage before you have to machine it. And then so what you're going to do is you lay your straight edge across the section you're going to check, and you take your feeler gauge and you try to fit it underneath it. And if it fits underneath it, like that right there, it fits under that side a little bit right there. But it doesn't fit over here. Looks pretty good. Nice and tight. Yep, won't fit under. And so we got a little bit of warpage on this side over here. And now you're going to take your tool and you're going to move it. You're going to go crossways. Do the same thing. Try to fit that feeler gauge under there. Looks like there's a little bit of warpage right on the very end of this one over here. That looks pretty good. And you have to be careful because you don't want to stick the feeler gauge in one of the passageways underneath the straight edge, because what's going to happen is the feeler gauge will go under it. So see how it's going under that hole, in that hole right there. That's not a valid check. You got to check on the part of the metal, the flat metal, where you're going to check for your feeler gauge. And then we're going to go this way, and we're going to check. Still a little bit of warpage over here. And then we're going to do a straight check like this. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. So that's the mating surface for your head gasket right there. So you're going to check that, and you're going to do that as many different ways as you can just to make sure that there's no warpage on the head. Aluminum heads warp really easy. Cast iron is the best. They don't warp as easy, but they still do warp. So if you get them hot enough. All right. But that's not the only surface you got to check. So now you got to check over here. Let's say your exhaust ports, or these are intake. Let's see. Those are intake ports right there, and you're going to check those too. And basically you're going to stay on the metal portion and don't check under the hole. You want to check on the straight flat parts of the metal on the head. And that side looks pretty good. I do a cross section as well. Looks good. Then we're going to check our exhaust ports. Make sure our exhaust manifold is going to tighten up to this flush and we won't have any exhaust leaks. And we go ahead and check that. And we do a couple different angles. And that looks pretty good as well. And so we got a little bit of warpage on the head on this side right here. And so what I usually do is I'll take my marker and I'll put a little X or something on the side that's warped so I know where it's warped. Then you got to send this out to the machine shop. They will machine it. Unless you're a machinist and you have a machine shop, then you can machine it yourself. And what they do is they take a slight thin layer off of the cylinder head. Now you don't want to do that very often, because if you do that a bunch of times, rebuild the engine a bunch of times, the head gets shorter and shorter. It can mess up your valve clearance with the pistons. The pistons might hit the valves when they come up. And also your timing belt or chain on the front of the engine will change the length, because you're bringing the head closer to the block. And then that will change actually a little bit on your timing as well. So you have to be careful how many times, and that's why we check them. One other check I like to do is if the edges are sharp. So see these edges all around the holes in the head, these passageways? If you can feel them, you scrape your finger on there, and if they're sharp, that's good. You want to feel a nice sharp edge on that. If they're rounded, that means somebody probably cleaned the gasket off with one of those air tools, and as they were cleaning it off, they would warp the head, and those passages aren't sharp anymore. They're not straight. It's not a straight angle there, and the gasket won't seal a lot of times, and it will leak right there. Okay. And then there's one other last check we're going to do, and that is going to check your galley plugs and your expansion plugs, or they're called freeze plugs. And so there's a freeze plug right here on the end of the cylinder head right here. You're going to check to see if it has any leaks on it. Make sure it's not corroded or rusted out or something like that. Here's a galley plug right there. That galley plug is got a little square head on there that screws in and out. You want to make the same thing. Make sure there's no leakage on that. A lot of times you have to check these before you clean the head to do your inspection, because you'll clean off the coolant or the leak that you might have seen before cleaning it. And then you check the other side as well, and you check your galley plug there, or your freeze plug there, and looks good. All right, and that is our first step of our cylinder head inspection.